G'day everybody and welcome to Basket Case. Today we're going to pick up where we left off last time. I spoke about carburetors and rejetting. So today we're going to give these things a good birthday. I'm going to replace the diaphragms. We're going to go through the jets and do what we need to do there and get them ready to go on the bike. We might even try and do a little bit of bench tuning where we set the butterflies. So let's crack on. Okay, I've already given these things a bath in degreaser. Just get in there with a toothbrush and give them a really good scrub up. I am going to clean some of the components with carburetor cleaner. However, carburetor cleaner and rubber do not mix, so you've got to be careful of that if you're ever doing any cleaning of carburetors, that you don't go zapping your diaphragms, etc. Because it really doesn't like it. It degrades it quite quickly. So these have only got 2 screws holding the bowls on. It's supposed to be 4, but there's only 2 on each of these at the moment. They've been pulled apart. I bought these from a wrecking yard. I've got a couple of sets of carburetors to play with. The original carbs that came with the bike are fairly crusty. They're almost to the point where they need to go into a ultrasonic bath or something because they're terrible. These are pretty good by the looks of it. But the original carbs that came with the bike have got jets in it that I want, so I'm going to rob the jets out. And the other problem with the other carbs is that one of these little posts here, I'll just zoom in on that. One of these little posts is broken, and it's broken so that the pin can actually flap about. Now, if it was broken off and the float was still steady, I probably wouldn't worry about it, but it's not. These are very, very fragile die-cast aluminium. You need to put a little, actually need to split the bank if you're going to replace the needle and seat. The needle and seats on these all appear to be quite fine. I've plumbed them with fuel and they don't leak. So I'm going to leave them alone, and it's best if you do that, unless you have to replace your needle and seat. So what I'm going to do, if you split the bank, so you pull the carburetors apart so that they're individual carburetors, and then you use a small quarter drive socket to sit on here and support that post, and you turn the carburetor sideways and tap it with a small pin punch very gently to knock that pin out. You want to be very, very careful. Okay, so getting back to our other video when we talked about jets, etc. This is our main jet here. Our pilot jet is under here in the primary circuit. So all of the fuel that goes into the circuits of this carburetor is drawn up through the main jet. There's an emulsion tube in there. An emulsion tube is where the needle runs, and an emulsion tube is essentially a pipe with holes in it, and the holes sit in the air, in the atmospheric part of the unflooded part of the float bowl, and the jet sits down in the fluid. So as it draws the fuel up into the chamber, it actually emulsifies the fuel with air, sort of pre-mixes it, and then atomizes it as it enters the chamber. The primary jet is under here. It might seem funny that it's got a screw on there, or some of them have a rubber plug, and that's because it too gets its fuel supply through this main jet. So it's like a mini emulsion tube. It's got little holes in it as well. The only other one that's in play here is this one here, which is the choke circuit. All right, so let's get the bowls off all of these and strip the jets out. And we might do one at a time. I'll just do the one, and then you'll know what to do for the rest. Okay. So let's remove the main jet to start with. It's important that you have a good quality screwdriver and that it fits the screw properly. Whoop. Let's make sure that's not going to happen again. Maintain a bit of downward pressure and crack him loose. Okay, there's your main jet. And it's stamped on the jet. The size of this jet, according to the little numbers on there, which you probably cannot read, is 127. It's actually quite small. remove the there's a little washer, little aluminium washer as well. Put that to the side. Just need to so the brass washer under the main jet has just popped out, and this is the primary jet. You can see the little holes. Like I said, it's a mini emulsion tube, but the jet hole itself is up under here. Alright, so we'll put a little bit of carb cleaner, try to get rid of any varnish or garbage down in there. And just squirt with a bit of air. So if you blow air down, it should come straight through that. This is your primary circuit. There's also air inlets in the front of the carburetor. That's the primary air. I'll give the rest of the carb a good going over the carb cleaner around the butterflies. And try and loosen up any Right, so we've got our brand spanking new pilot jet. We'll pop him in there. We've given that all a good clean now. Nip him up nice and firm. Replace the screw. Main jet. Now these are second hand, but they're the size that I want. So these are actually 147s. Just pull him down. Nice and firm. Okay. Our carburetors have new jets. The ones we haven't touched yet are the mixture screws, and I'll address them later. Right now we're going to do the diaphragms. So I've got some new ones here, and we'll work through that. So generally, in order to replace the diaphragms on these, and these are cactus, see that big hole? It means that the vacuum on top of the diaphragm will naturally try to equalise with atmosphere on the bottom, and the diaphragm simply won't work. So in order to replace them, you would normally need to buy an entire slide assembly, but I've found these online through a company called JBM Industries. Now these appear to be just a rubber diaphragm, whereas these are an insertion rubber, which means that there's a cloth in between the two layers of rubber. Now these are, these last for decades. How long these last, I'm not sure, but I will endeavour to give them a go anyway. There's one thing you do have to watch here. There's a little tab on the factory ones right there, and what that does is it locates this slide properly in the carburetor body, so that hole is in the right orientation. It essentially just needs to be facing the engine. So all I need to do, I think, is once I remove these, is just to mark this so I know where it is, so I can see it from the top when we pop it in. The way you get these off is with a pair of side cutters. Now the one thing, we're not going to be reusing this, we're not going to be reusing this, so the one thing you do have to be careful of is the actual slide itself, that we don't damage that. So just very carefully or the needle, don't want to damage the needle either. Just keep nipping away at it. Hey presto. There you go, Brian, hey presto. Now you can see I did manage to destroy it, but that's fine because we're not using it anyway. You'll note that they're very thin and they sandwich between these plastic rings. Now the new replacement ones don't use the plastic rings, they just have a very thick centre on them. I'll just try and remove this other one now without wrecking the thing. That was a bit easier. There we go. So I'll give that a pretty good clean now with a bit of carburetor cleaner. You can't get carburetor clean on any of these, so we'll just do it with the diaphragm away from it, and we'll try and fit a new one. Right, so I've got all 4 carburetor slides out and cleaned and stripped. Careful not to knock this edge here around, and I've done that, so that's all good. I've got the new JBM, so I need to look again, yes, JBM. So as you can see, they're quite thick here, and that will apparently hold quite tight in the groove. Now they do give you the option of putting a little bit of super glue on the dry side, but they claim that they won't rotate. So they also say that there's only 2 millimeters of stretch, so you've got to be very careful. So I'm just going to gently try and work it around. Okay, well that wasn't so hard. Oh, it's not on yet. Press him down. Very good. Yes, they're tight. Yep, that's good. 1 new diaphragm, 3 to go, and then they can go in the carb. So what I'll do now, I'll get a, I haven't got one here, I'll go back to my toolbox, but that hole needs to be on the engine side of the carburetor, so I'll just put a little mark on here so that when I'm assembling them from the top I can see that. Okay, 1 down, 3 to go. Last one, 4 done. Let's get them in the carb. So as I mentioned before, what I ended up doing was I just lined up that hole, marked it with a Sharpie. It's got to go to the engine side, which is me. Make sure they're clean. Pop the slip down in there. Make sure it's seated. Place one of our caps on. Screws in. I've replaced the screws with button head stainless steel bolts. How about we put the spring in there with it? That'll be useful. Right, let's run over them all, make sure they're all firm. Very good. Okay, last thing for me is the idle screw. What you want to do is screw him down until you feel him bottom out. Don't want to force it. And then back it off half, one and a half, 2 turns, and that'll get us started. It's good enough for getting us going, and make our changes from there once the engine's running. Again, they just need to be cleaned. If you feel you need to get onto the screw with something a bit abrasive, use aluminium foil. Half, one and a half, 2. Aluminium foil works very good to just rub them with that to help clean them up. It's like a very fine, just like using an extremely fine sandpaper. So a little bit of bench setting now for the butterflies to make sure that they're right. This cape would have come off a running bike at some stage, so I'm not too concerned about it. But we've now got new jets. We've give them a thorough clean, new diaphragms, and we've popped all our mixer screws in, our idle mixer screws. So we're just about almost ready to put them on the bike. We'll just do a little bit more of a bench setup before we do. So what I want to do is set these butterflies, make sure they're all opening at the same time, and the float levels. So that's the next step. Bit of brute force and ignorance. I actually left the 2 outside manifolds loose on the other side to try and aid in that. So before I go any further, I need to see if I can get them done up. Well, isn't it typical? It was Murphy's Law today, and it was Murphy's Law. Whatever could go wrong did go wrong. I apologise for skipping the part where I promised that I would show you how to bench set the butterflies. I was doing a couple of little jobs today where I thought that the camera was on, and for that period it was off, and that was one of the jobs that I did, and I'm sorry for that. But essentially what you do is you get a very thin piece of wire and you adjust your your idle screw, the actual idle that moves the butterflies, that moves these guys, and you pop a little piece of wire underneath, and you essentially feel that they're all right through all of the carburetors, that they're all in the same position. If they're not, you can adjust these screws to move the individual butterflies. Now, luckily for me, on the bank that I had, they were all fine. The other job I did that was missed out on the film was making this little cap to screw into the bottom of the float bowl, where you can plug a piece of clear pipe on to double check your float levels. Now, your float levels are measured from the gasket, where the gasket seats on the carburetor, to the top of the float at 25.7 millimeters plus or minus 1 millimeter. So that's where you set them initially, and then I like to sit them in the only true way to check that they're working properly is to sit them level, and then with the float bowl on, obviously you replace the drain with this little guy, and all I did there was cut a hose tail, 6mm hose tail, silver soldered it onto a second-hand old bung that I had, and then drill a hole through it. So that screws up into the bottom. You use it like a water level, and you measure down 2 point something. I can't remember what the measurement was, but I'll put a photo up. And then in the middle of the day, middle of filming and working on the bike today, my wife poked her head in the door and said, "Look, it's a beautiful day, sweetheart. You want to go for a ride?" And as you do, you make hay while the sun shines here in Tasmania. It was a beautiful day, so I jumped on the Ducati, she jumped on a scooter, and we went for a ride for a couple of hours, as you do. And I came back and I picked up the filming again, and I was fitting the carburetors, and the battery went flat in the camera. And of course, I didn't realise that. It was just running in the background, and it wasn't until I went to pick the camera up to show something that I realised it was flat, and by then it was all over Red Rover. So we've got the carburetors in, new diaphragms, new jets. They're clean. I've connected the fuel lines, the vent lines, the rubber hoses. I've connected the vacuum advance for the ignition. This is the second carburetor in. Cylinder 2 has this bit of pipe on there. None of the other carburetors do, and that's where the hose for the vacuum advance for your ignition fits. So that's all done now. So now it's just waiting for the rest of it to be finished. I've got to put a liner in the tank, fit the petcocks. I have to sort out all of the wiring. I've got 2 looms that I've got to try and make 1 out of 2 that works. I've got to do the brakes. There's a myriad of things that I need to do. So hang around, stay tuned. I apologise for the issues today, but hopefully you got a little bit out of what I did do, replacing the diaphragms, etc. So stay tuned, subscribe, and we'll be back with basket case. Bye for now. The centre of the carburetor is actually elliptical, so it's squashed in on the sides. And what that is it's a venturi. So what we have is a chamber that flows air into the engine.